Hey guys, Pete here. This will be my Better Call Saul Season 5, Episode 8 recap and review. Titled Bagman, Episode 8 has the distinction of not being my favorite episode of the series or even the season, but still manages to be just about perfect in every way. In truth, it feels more like a Breaking Bad episode, which is in no way a bad thing. And for that reason, I'm sure it will go down as a fan favorite in the Better Call Saul fandom. What stands out most to me about this is that director Vince Gilligan and company are able to make it feel so tense and riveting even though we know there is zero chance that Mike or Jimmy might die. As far as what actually happens, 508 is a really simple installment. Jimmy is given the task to be the bagman. Through no fault of his own, he gets ambushed by rivals of the Salamancas. Mike swoops in with a crucial save, and then they have to make their way out of the desert. One member of the attack team escapes after firing a volley of shots that disable Mike's truck. Jimmy's trademark Suzuki Esteem breaks down shortly after they leave the scene, so they have to head back on foot, staying off the road to avoid the bad guy who got away. It's two guys who we know will make it out against the elements, but it still turns out to be great because of the details and the performances. The episode starts out in a Salamanca family warehouse that has an amazing collection of classic cars and a humongous stash of $100 bills. The cousins make their return after heading south in season 4 to pick up the $7 million that Lalo needs for his bail. I really like that their bags had this compression mode to make them more stylish when they're empty, and the fact that the $7 million wasn't enough to even make a dent in what's sitting there. After they leave, we catch up with Lalo in the interview room reading a newspaper. He sees the article about the Los Pollos Hermanos fire, which puts him in a great mood, and he proceeds to explain what he needs Jimmy to do for him. At first, Jimmy tries to get out of picking up the money, and in a somewhat surprising turn, Lalo seems to let him off the hook. Maybe he was wrong. Maybe Mr. Goodman isn't the right choice for the job. No big deal. Jimmy makes it to the door as Lalo sits there looking like he's moved on completely, but instead of passing through it, he half coughs out $100,000. They end up agreeing on that number and things are set in motion. In light of their new honesty policy, Jimmy is compelled to tell his wife that he's officially on his way to becoming a friend of the cartel and lay out what that entails. He tries to minimize things, but she's not swayed. The idea of him picking up the money frightens her for good reason. And where in the past she might have just reluctantly said okay and let it go, here she lets her feelings be known. She says, "I don't like this. I don't want you to do it." We watch as he gives her a hug to try to make her feel better, and the looks on their faces tell us that it isn't effective. Jimmy doesn't believe it himself, and Kim's mind appears to already be somewhere else. It was at this moment that my fears, that my guess that Kim might be the one to visit Lalo in jail, which I mentioned in my preview video for this episode, started to feel all too real. After that, we head to the desert where Jimmy finds himself face to face with the cousins. They drop off the money without speaking a word, which is a great choice that shows that Saul Goodman's powers are useless in situations where the other side won't engage in conversation. Having secured the dough, Jimmy drives off and delivers a great comedic performance as he tries to cobble together a version of 99 bottles of beer about the money that he's now transporting. Things go south quickly as a Jeep tails him and the ambush unfolds. Jimmy has no choice but to give up the money, and to his horror, the leader gives the order to kill him. At the last second, a sniper bullet kills his would-be executioner, leaving a spray of his blood on his shirt. In a hectic scene, they're taken out one by one, and then we see his savior pull up in a pickup truck. They went to some lengths to disguise the identity as the sniper approached. Considering we knew of Mike's background and of his buying a sniper rifle back in season 2, it was pretty obvious it would be him, but the way it was shot, it wouldn't let the viewer be sure until they actually revealed it. This was Mike operating at the top of his game, which is a nice reminder of the character we know and love from Breaking Bad. Since he didn't know this was going to happen, he came by himself though, and even a badass of his stature runs into the snag of missing the last guy. As mentioned, that guy gets away after firing the shots that take out Mike's truck, and that means that they have to take the Esteem because it's the only option they have. As Mike takes control of the situation for Jimmy, who's in shock, it gives us a moment to appreciate just just how things will never be the same for him. They underline that idea when the Esteem breaks down. We watch as they push it off the road into a ditch, stopping to grab the world's second best lawyer again mug from under the seat, only to find that it too has become a casualty of the ambush. It's not very subtle. Jimmy's leaving parts of himself in the desert, and things that were uniquely Jimmy are giving way to things that will define Saul. With that out of the way, they strike out into the desert. Jimmy is uncharacteristically quiet after witnessing the shootout, and Mike, well, he's Mike. He's not exactly a chatty Cathy, but that doesn't mean this journey isn't eventful. The focus is mostly on Jimmy and his ever-intensifying transformation into Saul, but Mike actually delivers one of the most emotional moments. At a low point when Jimmy asks, "What's it for?" Mike says, "I have people waiting for me. They don't know what I do, they never will. They're protected. But I do what I do so they can have a better life. And if I live or if I die, it really doesn't make a difference to me as long as they have what they need. So when it's my time to go, I will go knowing I did everything I could for them." It's a powerful scene with great delivery by Jonathon Banks, and given what we know about how things turn out for Mike trying to get his money to Kaylee, it really hits home. As moving as it is, it's not the thing that gets Jimmy up off the ground. That turns out to be the return of the truck of the guy who got away. Jimmy gets up, wraps a space blanket around him so that there's no way you can miss him out there in the sun, and he heads towards the road. For a second, it felt like he was giving up and that Mike would have to save him for a second time, but as he's going, he tells Mike to get ready. His plan is to draw the driver to him so that Mike can take him out. He'll play decoy, and if things go right, they'll be in an air-conditioned Bronco sipping ice-cold water on the way into town. This makes for an intense scene where Mike finally hits the driver with the second shot, which happens to be in the nick of time, since Jimmy appears to be too exhausted to get out of the way if the shot would have missed. Turns out there won't be any aircon, since the crash is such that there isn't a chance they'll be driving away, right down to tires being left behind on the road. As Mike was approaching the vehicle, I was thinking, well, at least they'll probably get some water out of the deal. And it's like the writers could hear what I was thinking when he pulls out the crushed and empty water jug. We cut to Jimmy sitting with his head in his hands, a man with very little left in his reserves. He finally takes the Davison Maine bottle that's filled with his pee. It's been tied around his shoulder for the entire episode practically at this point, and he takes a long pull. When urine. And with that, he gets up to continue walking as Saul Goodman, an official friend of the cartel. The final shot is of a space blanket laying on the road. We see Mike step on it as they leave it behind, and the episode ends. Speaking of the space blanket, I skipped over the other big conversation in the desert where the blanket was introduced. I wanted to save that to the end because it ties in with the Kim storyline, which is the real tragedy of this episode. Jimmy let it slip that Kim would be worried when he doesn't return home because she knows why he came out to the desert in the first place. This sets off the alarm bells for Mike, who doesn't know Kim and thinks she might tell someone about the situation. As viewers, we know Kim is smarter than that and really doesn't have anyone to tell if you think about it. No family, no close friends, no co-workers she confides in, and enough sense either way not to contact the police. Unfortunately, this turns out to leave her few options on what to do when Jimmy doesn't come home. And that leads her to deciding to go see the client that sent him to pick up the money. No, Kim, no. I don't like this. I don't want you to do it. She did it though, and Lalo now knows she exists. He also knows she's no dummy after he gets the opportunity to size her up in person. And he knows she's a lawyer, which he could surely use to his advantage. It is the worst case scenario. And the only bright spot is how good Tony Dalton is at playing this character, Lalo Salamanca. As he's internalizing all the ways things shifted in his favor by Kim coming to see him, he essentially brushes her concerns aside and refuses to help her by telling her where he sent Jimmy to make the pickup. He says it's pointless because if he's alive, he'll show. Kim follows with, and if he's, but can't say the words out loud. It's a crushing thought for her, and she realizes that taking this risk doesn't pay off at all for her. There's this shot with Lalo walking out the door that says it all. Kim locked in her thoughts with Lalo feeling completely at ease. It feels like a beginning rather than a chance encounter, and that feels all kinds of wrong to me. After they have their discussion about Kim, where Mike explains correctly to Jimmy that his wife is now in the game, he says he can't make a fire and he offers Jimmy a space blanket. Mike wouldn't know it, but this is something that Jimmy associates with his brother Chuck. He won't take it, and possibly it's more like he can't take it. It's a symbol of all the problems he had with Chuck and how terribly everything turned out. Being cold is a small price to pay to not have to revisit thinking about that. And that's pretty much it for all the major things that happen. It is a great looking episode. There's one shot in particular where they're walking across the desert and the sky is in time lapse, but their moving isn't. It's really a cool looking shot. Vince Gilligan, of course, did direct this. He spent quite a lot of time out in the desert and does a really good job. There really is so much to like about this episode. We don't really veer off into the side stories. We don't see anything having to do with Gus or Nacho or any of the other characters. We focus primarily on Jimmy and Mike. Bob Odenkirk and Jonathon Banks both deliver outstanding performances. It's not like you would expect less, but with each new episode, these actors always find a way to remind us just how good they can be. At the end of the day, the Kim stuff is just a bummer. It's not like we don't know that something's going to happen to her. It's inevitable. And at the same time, we've been wanting these stories to all come together, but seeing it play out is really kind of heavy. And I just don't want to see something bad happen to this character. It's silly maybe, but it's the truth. There's so many great little details as they move through the desert as well, like the Davis and Maine bottle. The fact that it ends with him drinking his own urine just so he can keep going. He may be a friend of the cartel now, and I imagine he's probably going to be buying himself a new Cadillac with that $100,000, but he certainly earned it all the way. Some other random thoughts. The action sequence of the ambush was executed flawlessly. I don't watch Better Call Saul for the intense action sequences, but this was really put together well, I thought. Kim's decision to go see Lalo sucks, but how can we expect her to be okay with doing nothing at the same time? It seems like the real reason she didn't want Jimmy to be the bagman was because she sensed his life could be in danger. That's fair. That makes sense. She can put up with a lot, but she can't put up with him putting his own life in jeopardy. This isn't a scam he's doing. It's a real interaction with criminals, and that's the kind of thing that has life or death consequences. When the episode was funny, it was funny. The song in the car was hilarious to watch, and I couldn't help but laugh when we saw Jimmy pouring the water on that spot that he had on his shoe. Of course, that's going to be foreshadowing of him running out. And then the whole Davis and Maine bottle. I mean, he's got this thing filled up with his pee. He's got it tied with his tie around his shoulder. It's obvious that eventually he's going to have to drink it. And the whole thing, it's printed with Davis and Maine, so it reminds you of all the crazy stuff he was doing when he worked there to try to get fired so that he could keep his bonus. Lots of little callbacks and stuff too. It was cool when Mike grabbed the gas cap before they went down the road. It explained how he knew where Jimmy was, and it was a nice callback to earlier seasons whenever he was playing games with Gus. And when it was sad, it was sad. Not just the realization that Kim is now officially in the game, but the whole space blanket scene and Jimmy refusing to take it, knowing what that symbolizes, knowing that part of Jimmy's problem right now is he's never been able to sort out his feelings in the wake of his brother's death. We saw that bubble up to the surface in the last episode, and we know that he still carries that with him. So I'm going to leave it there. Let me know in the comments what you think. Were you super pumped up about this? Do you like the Breaking Bad style episode better than what we've been seeing? Or what did you think? We only got 2 episodes left. I will be making a second video this week about the trailer, so make sure you come back for that. Let me know what you want to see in those last 2 episodes. How have your thoughts changed? What are you looking forward to? What are you fearing? Please like this video if you enjoyed it. Please subscribe to my channel if you haven't already. Thanks for watching. I will talk to you soon.